On the day James chose to propose to his beloved, he deliberately selected the same day I departed for Germany to pursue my studies. He confided in his fiancée, explaining that while Emma had a playful side, she possessed a more gentle nature. He instructed her to remain in Germany permanently, ensuring she would not return. Our group of friends became anxious, fearing that I would make an impromptu trip back to New York, weeping and creating a public scene. However, they were unaware that I had no intentions of shedding tears or causing any disturbance, nor would I return before my departure to Germany. Within just 2 weeks, I had accepted a proposal from another man and was set to marry. Before the wedding, I returned all the gifts James had given me over the past decade, including the ring I had cherished since my last confession to him. It felt quite uncomfortable for me. Despite the room being filled with guests, an oppressive silence hung over it, with no one speaking a single word. After several drawn-out minutes, Ava, who was seated beside James, finally rose to break the tension. "Come on, James, you're making Emma look bad. She's still young." A young woman of 21 scoffed from a corner, prompting laughter to erupt among those present. Despite the amusement around me, I stood firm, determined not to leave in humiliation. But my perception of James began to blur. "Emma, do I need to explain everything?" James flicked the ash from his cigarette and stood up. "I've been clear about rejecting you since you were 16. I felt a slight choke in my throat, recalling how upset I was when I was younger and dating. "That's because you're an adopted daughter. Any mistake on your part would only bring disgrace to your adoptive parents." "What about that kiss on my 18th birthday?" I countered, and James's gaze momentarily revealed disgust. "Emma, you were drunk that night, causing a major disturbance. I just wanted to end the chaos quickly." Suddenly, I burst into laughter, but as I laughed, tears streamed down my face even more fiercely. "James, you've had 4 girlfriends, but every time I caused a scene, you broke up with them. Can you honestly claim you didn't have any feelings for me? It's because I hadn't met the woman I truly loved." He reached out and drew Ava into his embrace. "Listen carefully, Emma. I'll only say this once. I like Ava. I'm going to marry her. Your little tricks won't work this time." Ava gazed at him with both shyness and happiness, softly saying, "James." Without hesitation, he leaned in and kissed her. She wrapped her arms around his neck, standing on her toes to reciprocate. Their kiss was intimate and passionate, as though no one else existed. In that moment, memories of the kiss I had on my 18th birthday resurfaced, just as lingering and intense. It made me dream for 4 years without Awa Lucasing, foolishly believing he genuinely loved me. James moved out of the villa to live with Ava. On the day he moved, I was occupied with graduation projects at school. Choosing that day was likely to prevent me from making a public scene, but this time, I didn't hasten to find James or stir up trouble. After an initial wave of emotion, I composed myself and cleared my thoughts. That evening, I attended a graduation dinner with a few close classmates. While taking a break in the bathroom, I encountered Ava. "Emma, James is here too. Want to join us?" I shook my head. "I've made plans with my classmates. I'll pass." Ava's eyes suddenly welled up. "Emma, I come from a modest background. My uncle and aunt already dislike me. Can you stop speaking ill of me to them?" I was to Lucas aback and shocked. "Ava, I've never spelunkus about you to our elders." Ava forced a bitter smile. "I know you've had feelings for James for many years. It's hard to accept me being with him. I understand, but Emma, we're all women. Isn't it better to be kind in our actions and words? My temperament is much like my mom's, kind in what we do and say." I responded. "My temperament is much like my mom's, straightforward and without games." Hearing this, I became agitated. "Ava, stop making things up about me." Before I could finish, Ava suddenly knelt on the ground. "Emma, I beg you." I was startled and moved forward to lift her, but before I could touch her, she fell hard to the floor. "Emma, what are you doing?" James's angry voice rang out. A powerful force shoved me aside, causing my knee to strike the edge of the wall. The pain was sharp and intense. "James, don't misunderstand. Emma didn't mean to. You're defending her. I've had enough of her games since we were kids." James bent down to pick Ava up, his eyes cold with anger as he looked at me. "Emma, apologize." "James, shut up. Apologize." Ava clung to his arms, crying softly and pitifully. My knee was bleeding, with blood dripping down to my ankle, forming two bright red lines. Yet James acted as though he hadn't noticed, looking at me like I was the villain. I couldn't help but laugh at myself, unwilling to defend a single word. "I apologize, James." He seemed momentarily to Lucas aback, but soon grew more annoyed. "Not enough." I straightened up and bowed deeply. "Is this okay?" Ava watched me, her lips slightly curved before she quickly sobbed and softly urged James to let it go. "I can't take this." James's heart was filled instantly. "Emma, I've told you Ava is different. Bullying her won't make me break up with her. It will only make me cherish her more and dislike you." He carried Ava away. I stood there for a long, long time, my knee throbbing painfully, but my heart felt both empty and light. I understood that in that moment, any obsession or infatuation I had vanished completely. That night, Ava posted 3 tweets in succession. They were screenshotted and sent to me by some malicious individuals in our social circle, especially James's replies, which were prominently highlighted. I realized their hidden intent was to see me humiliated. In the past, I would always impulsively rush to James, crying and causing trouble. He would grow impatient, but eventually give in each time, leading me to mistalucously believe he cared. But this time, I ignored it. However, she dialed a call from 7 days prior. "Auntie, it's Emma. Regarding what you mentioned, I've made a decision. When I was 7, my parents died in an accident. My uncle, who was close to my dad, took me in. And Auntie, she was my mom's best friend growing up. But later, she eloped with her lover, and they lost contact. After wandering halfway around the world, she finally settled in Germany. By then, my parents had already passed away. Auntie wanted me to live in Germany. She also wanted to fulfill a promise she made with my mom when they were young, to marry into her family and become her daughter-in-law. 7 days ago, I didn't agree, but I didn't want to hurt her feelings, so I said I would think about it. Just tonight, I suddenly let go of all those years of obsession. That one-sided love was silly and ridiculous. I didn't want to be the laughingstock anymore. 6 months ago, James arranged for me to continue my studies in Germany. At the time, I didn't want to go and cried a lot, but he never changed his mind. Now, I think it's a pretty good opportunity. Maybe destiny's way of arranging my fate. On the other end of the call, Auntie was elated. "Emma, Lucas is just waiting for you to say yes so he can fly to New York and propose." I held my phone, feeling an unexpected warmth, but all the laughter in my ear made me feel strangely confused. 15 years living together and 7 years of loving him. It turns out it only takes 7 days to completely let go. James and Ava's engagement day. They intentionally chose the same day I departed for Germany. As a result, not many people came to bid me farewell. When I disembarked from the plane, I turned on my phone. Messages flooded in, mostly about James and Ava's engagement. I simply laughed it off, deleting and blocking their contacts immediately. Before heading to Germany, I met Lucas. I didn't want any drama or attention. Lucas respected my wishes. He proposed, and we exchanged rings. Just like that, we got engaged quietly. Now my account had an additional $1 billion as a bride price. On my ring finger, I wore a simple band. As I was about to enter the car Lucas's family had sent to pick me up, my phone suddenly rang. It was James's cousin, Gina. "Emma, my brother's engagement is about to start. Where are you?" "I just arrived in Germany." "Then hurry back. You can still make it." "Why should I go back?" I responded calmly. Gina was to Lucas aback. "Emma, are you out of your mind? If you don't come back to cry and make a scene, my brother is truly going to be with someone else." "Why should I come back and make a scene? Isn't it your brother's happy day?" "Emma!" Gina's voice suddenly rose. "Are you crazy?" I was about to hang up when Ava's voice came through. "Emma, aren't you attending our engagement? James always saw you as a sister, so that makes me your sister-in-law, and I'd love your blessing." I glanced at Lucas standing by the car. His tall frame and gentle eyes put me at ease. "Sure, I wish you two all the best," I replied. James was in the garden with some friends, smoking. He kept glancing at Gina and the others, probably receiving heads-ups about Emma again, as was usual. Anytime another woman was around him, they'd inform Emma, and then Emma would come crying to him. He always disliked needy women and found them annoying, so he would just dismiss them. This time was likely no different, which is why he chose the day I left for Germany. It wasn't exactly smooth sailing with the engagement ceremony scheduled for 6 p.m. James found it somewhat bothersome. If Emma found out and flew back, she'd arrive just in time. James, what if Emma comes back to cause trouble? Yeah, you're getting engaged to someone else. She's going to flip out. She seemed pretty calm lately, even with you and Ava getting cozy. She didn't react. The cigarette in James's fingers had a long ash dangling. He forgot to flick it off, lost in thought about his friend's last comments. Emma had been unusually quiet these days, but knowing her, she wasn't one to remain silent. He had rejected her countless times over the years. She was always resilient, never considering giving up. Sure, she was older now, a bit more mature. Suddenly a thought struck him, and he chuckled, stubbing out his cigarette. Just wait and see. She's never been one to stay put. So, you think Emma will come back to stir things up? James didn't respond, but was fairly certain. That girl always had love on her mind during her teenage years, reading romance novels day and night, practicing all sorts of crazy antics on him. He knew her well and was willing to bet she'd show up just as the engagement began. Make sure security keeps an eye out, James instructed them. Don't let any chaos break out. As he finished speaking, Gina rushed up, dragging her dress behind her. Emma's here right outside the gate. James felt an odd sense of joy but quickly concealed it with a frown. She's causing trouble again. She never learns. What do we do now? If she causes a scene, our family will be humiliated. James's expression hardened as he strode outside. I'll see what games she's playing. His entourage followed him outside. Just as they left the garden, Ava suddenly called out softly, James. Ava wore a beautiful satin gown, her hair styled in an elegant braid, and her makeup was understated. The engagement ceremony was set for 6, with a few hours to spare. Ava was anxious inside, but showed none of it outwardly. What brings you here? James halted his walk. His eyes met Ava's face. She was stunning, the kind of beauty that made a man want to protect her, unlike Emma's wild nature. Due to her modest upbringing, Ava was somewhat timid, always speaking in a gentle voice. When he met Ava, he was suffering headaches from Emma's antics. He was easily attracted to Ava's calm and peaceful demeanor. Moreover, unlike his previous girlfriends who had pursued him, he and Ava had met because he saved her from trouble. He always had a bit of a hero complex. So his feelings for Ava were quite different. She wasn't just someone to mess around with. I heard Emma's back, Ava started, but didn't finish before her eyes began to redden. I'm kind of worried. She bit her lip and looked down. James, what if we can't go through with the engagement today? What are you thinking? James lifted his hand, placing it on Ava's shoulder, and gave her a reassuring pat. Don't worry, I'll take care of it now. But Ava clung to James's sleeve. James, I'm scared. I'm afraid you'll go with her. Tears streamed down Ava's face. She looked so fragile, as though she might break at any moment. Nonsense, Ava. My brother doesn't even like Emma, Gina interjected with a smug smile. Emma's so spoiled and always throwing fits. My brother's had enough of her. He would never go with her. Gina truly didn't like Emma. Ever since Emma was adopted by our family, Gina's uncle and aunt, who used to adore her, started prioritizing Emma's treatment for the sake of appearances. But Gina still detested her. For years, her favorite pastime was watching Emma embarrass herself. Now that Emma was sent off to Germany, hardly anyone saw her off. They packed all her belongings and sent them ahead to Germany weeks ago, as if worried she'd refuse to leave. Gina couldn't have been happier about it. As long as Emma wasn't around, she didn't care who became her sister-in-law. James suddenly looked at Gina. Weren't you always getting along with Emma? There's no way I got along with her. I couldn't stand her, Gina cried, abandoning her previous facade. I had only acted close to Emma in the past to gain her trust and make her listen to me, but now I don't have to maintain the act, and I feel relieved. Gina didn't notice the subtle change in James's expression and continued, How about this? You stay with your fiancé and I'll handle Emma. Don't worry, I'll make sure she embarrasses herself. How do you plan to embarrass her? James's voice was calm. I'll have the bodyguards throw her out. She's crashing an engagement party. Her parents will be mortified. James's hands suddenly rose. The sharp sound of a slap echoed, causing everyone to freeze, especially Ava. Her brows furrowed as she looked at James, the darkness in his eyes deepening. "Why did you hit me?" Gina cried, covering her face. "Emma is still technically my sister," James replied harshly. "And you should be calling her your sister, too. She's been our family's ward for over 10 years, Gina. Why are you defending her? You said you couldn't stand her." Gina cried louder, more out of surprise than pain. "We wouldn't say these things if it weren't for your hatred." James stood silent for a long time. Did he truly hate Emma as everyone claimed? He stood silent for an extended period. Did he genuinely despise Emma as people said? When she first joined the family, they were best friends. If Emma was hurt, he would cheer her up and carry her home. If she was bullied at school, he'd immediately protect her. He even bought her sanitary pads when she first got her period. Emma had always depended on him as they grew older. She became possessive, and he initially liked her clinginess. When did things change? James suddenly felt confused. Ava's sobs brought him back to reality. Oh, right. It was Emma who changed first. As she matured, spoiled by the family, Emma became unruly and domineering, refusing to let him be with any other woman. That's why he became tired and distant, sending her off to Germany despite her pleas. He only wanted her to grow up and mature. He figured that once she learned, he'd bring her back. He couldn't bear the thought of leaving her alone in a strange city after all they'd been through, but it seemed she hadn't learned right from wrong. On such a joyous day, she still acted selfishly, causing chaos right after arriving. James pulled Ava into a hug. "Go wash your face and let the makeup artist fix you up. Once I handle Emma, I'll come see you. The engagement will proceed on time. Don't worry." James dried Ava's tears and then turned to leave. Ava stood there watching James walk away. For some reason, she still felt an inexplicable unease deep inside. Gina had just raised a very good point. Everyone knew how much he disliked Emma. Yet, with just a few words from Gina, he actually slapped his cousin. Did he really dislike Emma? Or perhaps, deep inside, was there something different about Emma? When James reached the main entrance, he didn't see Emma, but her pink minicar was parked quietly there. Standing by the car was her best friend, Sarah. James's steps suddenly halted. It felt as if something gently tugged at his heart, making it sink a little. That's when he remembered. Emma had given this car to Sarah before leaving New York. When Sarah saw him, she immediately approached. James noticed she held a red envelope in her hand. Sarah wore no expression and got straight to the point. "Emma asked me to bring you and Ava some gifts." But James didn't reach out to take them. Sarah frowned slightly and added, "There's one more thing." "Go ahead." "Emma left in a hurry and didn't really get a chance to see you. She tried calling a few times, but you didn't answer, so she couldn't get it back. On your last birthday, she gave you an antique brooch. It was a Tolucas of love from her mom to her dad." Sarah smirked a little and continued, "Emma mentioned that this brooch is meant for her future husband. Leaving it with you now just doesn't fit. Mr. James, can you give the brooch to me? I'll take it to her when I visit Emma in Germany." James suddenly looked down, his eyes landing on the blue shimmer resting on his chest. When he had dressed that morning, he had chosen this sapphire brooch for some reason. It didn't exactly match his suit, but he hadn't changed it. Now, as he looked at the brooch again, he felt only discomfort. Future husband, huh? How could she marry someone else when she liked me so much? She didn't come herself and sent Sarah to ask for the brooch. Honestly, her actions have really thrown me off. Mr. James, tell Emma that it's not right to take back gifts once given. But if she's really determined, then she should come and talk to me herself. James finished and turned to leave, but Sarah quickly stopped him. "Mr. James, please wait a moment. I'll call Emma right now." Emma is getting married. Such an important brooch cannot stay with another man. Emma reminded her several times to ensure the brooch was brought to her wedding so she could personally pin it on her groom. Sarah had never liked James, but Emma had always been so stubborn. She was like a fool, hung up on him for so many years only to be cast aside. Sarah felt the urge to slap James every time she thought about it. But now, Emma had finally moved on and found such a wonderful man. Sarah was genuinely happy for her. This trip was important. She couldn't fail. When I got the call from Sarah, I was already almost at Lucas's place. "Sarah, what's up?" "Emma, I went to James like you asked for the brooch, but he wouldn't give it up. He said if you wanted it, you'd have to ask for it yourself." I glanced at Lucas beside me, feeling a little sheepish. We were still practically strangers. Even though he acted polite and refined, there was just a strong aura of authority around him that was hard to ignore. He had to Lucas a work call earlier in the car, giving orders with such decisiveness. That natural air of authority made me feel even more green and youthful. But I hadn't even responded to Sarah when the phone was suddenly to Lucas over by James's voice. "Emma, do you want the brooch or are you just causing trouble?" I was to Lucas aback, then laughed in disbelief. "If you're trying to ruin my engagement to Ava, I'd advise you not to bother. If you want the brooch, take it back the way you gave it. Such a precious thing shouldn't go through someone else's hands." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my tone calm. "Sarah is my best friend. You can give it to her. I'll take responsibility for any consequences." James laughed a little. "Emma, how clear do I need to be? However it was given to me, that's how it should be to Lucas back." The call ended abruptly. I felt both angry and humiliated, my face gradually flushing red. How did I give him that brooch? On my 18th birthday, James and I got drunk. It was in my bedroom on the 3rd floor of James's old house. He pressed me against the door and kissed me passionately. By the end, I could barely stand, and he was clearly moved. But he somehow managed to stop. Before he left, I called out to him and put the brooch in his hand. I explained the significance of the brooch to him. He didn't say anything, but he kept it. That made me think he silently accepted my feelings. The past few years felt like a terrible dream. Now that I've woke Lucas up, I just want to put it all behind me. I thought James would happily return the brooch, as if discarding trash. But I never expected him to say what he did. It was only then I realized the foolishness of youth always comes with a price someday. If the brooch didn't hold such meaning, I wouldn't bother taking it back. But now I'm getting married. It's not fair to Lucas to leave the brooch with James. Is something wrong? Lucas's voice suddenly broke through. I instinctively looked up, my eyes meeting his deep gaze. The feelings inside were so hard to swallow. I didn't want to hide them, but our current unfamiliarity made it difficult to express. "No." I eventually shook my head. I was pondering in my mind. Even if I have to ask James's dad for help, I'll do whatever it takes to get the stuff back. So I made up my mind and began to relax. It's really no big deal. Just a little thing with James. I put on a carefree look and gave Lucas a smile. "I can handle it." Lucas didn't press any further. He just nodded gently. "All right. If anything gets tough, Emma, you can always find me. After all, you're my fiancé now." Hearing him say fiancé made the back of my neck warm. I'm engaged now, huh? In just 2 more weeks, I'll be marrying him. There's a bittersweet feeling in my heart, somewhat vague but also tinged with hopeful joy. I didn't have the courage to make eye contact with him. I just glanced quickly, then nodded and mumbled an Lucas didn't say more. We arrived at Lucas's house. He exited the car first, then turned to help me. I noticed the engagement ring on his middle finger. Since the day he put it on, he hadn't to Lucas it off. Lucas helped me out of the car. Once I was out, he didn't let go of my hand. Instead, he held it naturally. At first it felt a bit uneasy, but his hand was warm and dry. His fingers were long and strong. My heart suddenly settled down. It felt like this is how it was meant to be. "Lucas?" Auntie saw us walking hand in hand. She was instantly all smiles. Before we even got close, she quickly approached us, scooping me into a hug with tears streaming down her face. "Emma, you look so much like your mom when she was young." My tears couldn't be held back anymore. Her scent smelled so familiar, just like my mom's faint memory. Lucas, off to the side, shook his head a bit helplessly. He handed us tissues. "Auntie, you and Emma hugging and crying like this, someone might think I bullied you." Auntie married Lucas's dad when she was 40. She never had children, but she treated children without blood ties as her own. Lucas always respected her. I had known that for a long time. Still, I never quite understood why Lucas accepted this engagement. After all, it had nothing to do with him. But Auntie told me not to worry, saying I'd understand the reason someday. So I didn't probe further. Auntie chuckled and helped me dry my tears. She held my hand tightly. "Emma, come home with Auntie." I instinctively looked at Lucas. He was looking at me too. Behind him, the trees were lush and green. When I looked over, Lucas's eyes were filled with gentle smiles. He reached out his hand to me. "Emma, let's go home." With 20 minutes left until 6, Ava had finished all her makeup and hair, but James hadn't come downstairs from the lounge yet. Ava hesitated for a moment before approaching. The lounge door wasn't locked and faint voices could be heard inside. Ava quietly moved closer. "James, is Emma really not coming back? If she were, she'd already be here. No way she's making it by now." "James, I've actually wanted to ask you for a while. Do you really feel nothing for Emma? You two grew up together. She's beautiful, innocent, and she's all about you." Ava instinctively held her breath. There was a long silence before James spoke. "No feelings." "How could you feel something for her?" James chuckled. "He's 5 years older than Emma. When Emma got home, she was just starting school." Even when she grew up and became beautiful, James for some reason remembered that night on her 18th birthday. He must have been out of his mind to kiss her all dizzy and dazed, and he took that brooch. But Emma's really pretty now. Yeah, a few of my buddies are into her. Remember last year's horse race? Oh, for sure, she wore that Red Riding outfit and won first place. I still remember how she smiled so brightly when she took off her hat on the podium. James remembered too. He recalled that day vividly. How Emma couldn't stop chattering to him, showing off her pony, and going on and on about how handsome the prize guest was. But in her heart, all she thought of was him. Just sneaking glances. James's lips curled up slightly. They both loved horseback riding. Emma's little pony. It's still at the ranch. Ava suddenly opened the door. James! She wore a white gown shimmering in satin. It was a replica of James's mom's engagement dress. His mother came from a modest background. His father's legendary rescue had led to a beautiful marriage tale that continues to be Speluka's about with delight. James's proudest achievement in life was his parents' deep love. Perhaps that's why, when he saved Ava, he couldn't help but feel something special for her. And now, standing before him, Ava looked so much like his mom did in those old photos, gentle and graceful. James's heart immediately softened. Although he had never envisioned advancing this far with Ava, today he was determined to present her with a flawless engagement. Rising to his feet, James extended his hand toward Ava. She responded with a subtle, gentle smile, gripping her dress as she approached him. "I was worried since you didn't come down sooner." "Everything's fine now. Let's go. Have you sorted things out with Emma?" James glanced down at the sapphire brooch on his chest. "Emma's unpredictable. You're kind-hearted. Just keep her in Germany from now on and don't let her return." Ava felt a sudden wave of joy but maintained a worried expression. "Is that really okay? Emma's used to getting her way. I worry she might feel down being alone out there." James replied calmly, "Let her be a little upset. She'll learn to handle things sensibly." Ava remained silent. She gently intertwined her arm with his as they descended the stairs. It was 6 o'clock, and her engagement party was about to commence. From this day forward, she wouldn't have to endure her miserably poor life anymore. No more living in those questionable neighborhoods or sharing a cramped room with her 2 sisters. Her family would flourish alongside her. James was like a gift from above, offering a chance to elevate her social standing. She intended to hold on to him tightly and never let go. Her wedding with Lucas was scheduled for 2 weeks later, leaving little time. However, Lucas's family took the union of their eldest son very seriously, having planned it for years. Consequently, despite being busy, everything was proceeding smoothly. Aunt mentioned that when Lucas was a child, he became seriously ill. After his recovery, his family consulted a master who advised that he should marry by September of his 27th year to ensure a smooth, healthy, and prosperous life. His family took this advice earnestly. So, once I accepted the engagement, everyone in Lucas's family was overjoyed. I received numerous valuable gifts. The most meaningful was a pair of jade bangles from Lucas's birth mother. When Lucas presented them to me, I felt touched but also guilty and uneasy. The best thing to reciprocate was my mother's brooch, which she'd given to my father. but it was currently with James. Maybe Lucas noticed I was feeling down. He took me to the garden and asked, "Emma, are you okay? You okay?" with concern. The bangles on my wrist glimmered in deep green. Even though I wasn't knowledgeable about luxury items, I recognized their value. I dislike when people are kind to me. If they're nice in small ways, I want to repay them exponentially, even 100-fold. I mentally went through a list of gifts I could give Lucas, but nothing seemed adequate. I was already feeling guilty and upset. Then I caught Lucas's gentle gaze. For some reason, when I finally released James, I didn't cry when I left New York after 21 years, nor did I cry when James refused to return that brooch. But at that moment, tears began to stream down my face. Lucas became somewhat flustered. Despite being a perfect gentleman from a good family, it was evident he lacked experience in comforting girls. As he dabbed my tears with a handkerchief, his movements were somewhat awkward. I laughed through my tears. "Lucas, you're messing up my makeup." "You were wearing makeup?" he asked earnestly. "I thought you were naturally beautiful." I admitted I can be a bit vain and superficial at times. Just like that, I felt happier. "Lucas, are you this smooth because you've dated many girls? Do childhood crushes count?" I widened my eyes. "You didn't date much as you grew older. If I said no, it would be a lie. While studying abroad in college, I dated a girl. We realized we weren't compatible, so we ended things amicably. Any crushes since then?" Lucas paused for a moment. "Yeah, there was someone. Just my luck, she wasn't interested in me," he replied. I somewhat understood then. Maybe he only agreed to this marriage because someone he liked loved someone else. Suddenly, a hint of bitterness surfaced within me, but I quickly consoled myself. This was for the best. At least I wouldn't feel too guilty internally. When I left Lucas's house that day, Lucas said, "Emma, I hope you'll see me as your future husband from the bottom of your heart. I know you're always independent and capable, but letting your guard down sometimes would make me happy too." I felt as though my heart had opened up a bit. "Lucas, I will." I first gave Lucas a pair of cufflinks and a tie clip, not particularly expensive, but something I whimsically designed myself. Clean. I hadn't designed them for James back then. I was simply missing my parents. Thus, I transformed my longing into pencil sketches. My wedding plans were moving into high gear, but Lucas's family hadn't announced who his bride was yet. I was new at school and didn't want to boast. Additionally, my situation with James wasn't resolved. When James had me come to Germany for school, he likely intended all along to prevent my return to New York. So when the house staff packed my belongings, nearly everything was sent to Germany, including every gift James had given me over the past 10 years. Among them was an expensive pink diamond ring, a birthday present from James when I turned 18. It had once been my most cherished possession. Previously, whenever I felt sad, seeing that ring would instantly lift my spirits because gifts like rings always held more significance than other jewelry. But now, I gradually began to understand that when someone doesn't truly care for you, or their feelings aren't sincere, even a marriage contract between the two of you feels meaningless, let alone these material possessions. As I sorted through the items James had given me one by one, my heart was unexpectedly calm, not even a flicker of disturbance. Eventually, the jewelry box was empty, but my heart felt lighter than ever. As I packed them up, ready to send them back, a few Instagram notifications appeared on my phone from the stable staff. My little horse was ill, appearing listless and refusing to eat. Looking at the photos immediately brought tears to my eyes. The staff mentioned that the pony might be missing me because I usually visit it every few days, but this time I hadn't gone as scheduled. I quickly called to check on it. "Miss Emma, Mr. James is actually here too. Let me have him talk to you." I paused briefly before hearing James's clear voice. "Emma, when you first got that pony, what did you say? Forgotten already?" "Of course not. I hadn't forgotten. All the kids in the family have their own pets, but the only rule is to fully take responsibility for the pet they choose and care for it properly. Absolutely no abandonment halfway. But wasn't your decision to study in Germany something you made 6 months ago, Emma?" James suddenly let out a cold chuckle. "Since when did you ever listen? You've always been troublesome since you were young, haven't you? Mom and Dad adore you. They can't bear to see you leave. If you shed a tear at the end of the day, you're not really that interested in your pony." In that moment, James's heart skipped a beat as he seemed to grasp his own underlying message. Emma didn't truly care about him either, or she wouldn't have gone to Germany. She wouldn't remain unmoved upon learning about his engagement. She wouldn't skip his engagement party or return the brooch he gave her. "I'll find time to visit it. If possible, I might bring it to Germany." "Are you planning to never come back to New York?" James's voice suddenly carried a hint of anger. I simply looked down and laughed. "Maybe. Yeah, I'm going to get married in Germany. Naturally, my life's focus will shift here, but there's no need to inform James of all this, Emma. You're still as stubborn and childish as ever, haven't grown a bit." James's voice grew colder. "You better not regret this, Emma." "Regret what?" I responded. "What are you regretting, Emma? Ava and I are already engaged, and the wedding date is being set." And then, "Emma, don't tell me you don't understand. If I really marry Ava, then what?" I laughed, feeling relieved and free. "James, I'll sincerely wish both of you well, truly." There was sudden silence from James on the other end of the call. I didn't wait for him to respond. I gently hung up the phone. When I was 16, my feelings began to develop relentlessly. Stubbornly, I refused to call him brother. Now, nearly 6 years had passed, and he had finally returned to his original rightful place. I don't hate him. Don't blame him. After so many years together, I sincerely wish him well. I called Uncle John. After a friendly conversation about how he and Aunt Mary were doing, I gently brought up the brooch. "Uncle John, back then I was young and reckless, made a lot of jokes. Looking back now, I feel regret and shame. Since James is already engaged, I think it's best not to create unnecessary misunderstandings." Uncle John sighed over the phone. "Emma, I've always liked you, always cared about you. In fact, I've always wanted you to be my daughter-in-law. Your Aunt Mary gets teary whenever she talks about you these days. I also feel heartbro Lucas." His sadness was genuine due to their deep affection for me. "Uncle, matters of the heart can't be forced. I'm not feeling wronged, Uncle. I've come to terms with it and moved on. I'll make sure to get that brooch back for you. In a few days, your aunt and I will be heading to Germany for a wedding. I'll personally bring the brooch to you then." I thanked him and ended the call. The staff responsible for handling valuable shipments had arrived by that time. The gift boxes were loaded onto the truck and would soon be safely returned to James. In a few days, Uncle John and Aunt Mary would come to Germany to return my sapphire brooch. Those foolish, laughable, youthful days would finally come to a complete end. James got drunk again at a friend's party. When he emerged from the bathroom, he overheard Sarah on the phone. "I'm leaving for Germany tomorrow. I promised I'd be your only bridesmaid." "Oh, and did you pick the best man, huh? You picked 7 groomsmen for me? Oh my God, Emma. I'm so in love with you, babe." James stood in the long, empty hallway. Sarah's excited voice seemed to echo in his ears, but in the end, only Emma stuck with him. He thought he must have been drunk. Otherwise, why would he hear such an absurd joke? Yeah, he was drunk, really drunk. That's why he thought he heard things. Or maybe he just missed Emma so much that he turned someone else's name into Emma's in his head. James suddenly stumbled over Sarah? Sarah, having just ended her call, was startled. "James, who are you talking to?" James stared into Sarah's eyes. "I heard you say you're going to a wedding in Germany, and I heard Emma's name." His handsome face was slightly contorted. His usually flirtatious eyes reddened. He forced a smile, but it was cold and twisted. "Don't tell me you're attending Emma's wedding." Sarah was initially shocked by his expression, but then snapped back. "For how many years have you been upset over Emma? How many tears have you shed? She feels immense satisfaction seeing you like this. Mr. Perfect in the Goo family, getting what you deserve. Didn't you enjoy toying with people's hearts? Didn't you love seeing those who liked you worry over you? You'll have plenty of opportunities to experience that feeling yourself someday. But I won't reveal the truth. Emma didn't want me to, so I won't. I won't let James know and crash the wedding in Germany. That was my dearest friend's happiest day. There's no way I'd let a jerk like him ruin it." "What?" "You misheard. I'm going to Germany for a wedding with Emma. But it's our old classmate getting married." James didn't seem convinced. "I wasn't aware Emma had any close friends in Germany." Sarah chuckled. "James, have you ever truly cared about Emma? Genuinely tried to understand her? Have you ever considered her feelings? Put yourself in her shoes? James, you haven't. You never knew how amazing our Emma is, and you never deserved her admiration over the years. Sarah finished and turned to leave. James watched her walk away, feeling a sudden pain in his heart. He didn't even know why it hurt, just an urgent, overwhelming need to see Emma even if only once. But the next day, James received a large package shipped from Germany. The reason it arrived so quickly was that Lucas had his shipping company arrange a special flight to New York. At the time, I was busy and excited with wedding rehearsals. Unaware of all this, when James opened those boxes, his hands trembled inexplicably. At first, the items seemed unfamiliar. But soon, a flood of memories overwhelmed him. The first Hermes bag he bought for Emma, the first pearl necklace, the car keys to her first car, a box filled with colorful gems, and lastly, the pink diamond ring. James held the small pink box, and suddenly his vision blurred. James, when are you planning to marry Emma? Friends used to tease you and Emma like that. Back then you were young, rebellious, and arrogant. Many girls pursued you, but none interested you. 18-year-old Emma was beautiful and delicate, like a ripe peach. Taking her out sparked envy everywhere, which you secretly loved. Such a pretty Emma liked only you. Back then you thought you'd marry her. Or rather, deep down you always knew you would. That's why you gave her the pink diamond ring. But when did you start getting tired of Emma? When did new flings surpass first loves? Were you truly over her? Or just certain she'd never leave you? James tightly gripped the ring and absurdly began to cry. Meanwhile, I was busy with last-minute wedding rehearsals, unaware of James's reaction upon seeing those gifts from the past decade, especially that cherished pink diamond ring. As Lucas kissed me for the first time during rehearsal, I didn't know that James had slapped Ava over that ring. How ironic, when Ava tried to frame me, when James pushed me and I hurt my knee. None of us anticipated such a day. But James and Ava were now irrelevant in my life. I didn't care at all. When Uncle John brought over a brooch for me, I shared the news of my upcoming wedding with them. They were surprised because the wedding they were coming to Germany for was Lucas's family's arranged match for their eldest son. The mysterious fiancé, whom even the sharpest media couldn't photograph, turned out to be me. They were happy for me, but also tearfully regretful, especially Aunt Mary. She held my hand tightly, refusing to let go. Emma, I don't want you to cry on your big day, but I just feel so let down. It's my fault for not raising my son right. As a result, every step he takes is a mistake. James wanted to break up with Ava, but Ava insisted. Her entire entourage also caused a scene at James's place, threatening to stay put. Anyway, they were barefoot and unafraid of those wearing shoes. While the two were turning his world upside down, Ava discovered she was pregnant. James's family wouldn't make a girl get an abortion, so their wedding seemed inevitable. I teared up, thinking about when I first went to James's house, crying every night for my parents, the scenes of her hugging and comforting me, remembering those carefree days when they loved me like their own daughter brought tears to my eyes in the end. Emma, it's James who isn't lucky enough. Auntie wiped my tears, sighed, but seemed truly relieved. Lucas's family has an excellent reputation, and Lucas himself is outstanding among the new generation of Germans. Emma, you're going to be happy. I know that with a gentle and refined man like Lucas, even if he doesn't love me, I'd still have a happy life. But I never expected happiness to be far more intense than I had imagined. When I pinned that sapphire brooch on Lucas, he showed me a photo. In the picture, I was holding a trophy, smiling brightly in a certain direction below the stage. Lucas was standing next to me, smiling at me. It was during that horse racing event when I won the championship. The presenter was Lucas, but back then, my mind was entirely focused on James, and I just gave him a quick glance. All I knew was that he was a young and handsome guy. I never thought fate would bring us together later on. I laughed and cried, pointing at the picture of the two of us like a child, but couldn't say anything. Lucas hugged me from behind. Remember, I said I used to like someone? He touched the brooch, resting his chin against my neck. Emma, I once told myself, when I get that sapphire brooch, I'll tell you. The one I fancy is you. I was obsessed with romance novels in my youth. There's a term often used to describe a male lead, A gentlemanly beast? It's actually a disguised compliment, but I never thought a man like Lucas could have that beastly side. On our wedding day, he was all dignified and handsome, like a snow-capped mountain. But on the wedding night, once the clothes were off, he turned into a beast. For the first time, I heard so many passionate love words. For the first time, I was coaxed into those embarrassing positions. For the first time, I cried when it hurt and cried when it felt good. The first time I experienced love's pleasures, spent a wild, tireless night. The next day, after becoming a bride, I slept past noon. Still in bed while Lucas had already completed his morning run, workouts, tea, reading the paper, and catching up on the news. A few days after the wedding, the house staff laughed as they told me, "Ma'am, you wouldn't believe how much Lucas was smiling that day." You know, in all the years I've been at the Lucas house, it was the first time I saw him talk so much in the morning, greeting everyone. I think he'd love to carry a megaphone just to tell the world he's married and he loves his bride so much. I was both embarrassed and amused. I quickly made up an excuse to hide in the garden. I saw Lucas's car drive through the gate. He got out, handed his briefcase and coat to the servant, and immediately looked towards me. "Lucas." I stood among the flowers, waving and jumping with a smile. "My pony was sent to Germany yesterday. Lucas arranged everything himself. It was well to Lucas' care of and seemed perfectly fine. When I saw it yesterday, Lucas had arranged everything himself. It was well cared for and looked perfectly fine. When I saw it yesterday, it happily pranced around me." Lucas smiled, seeing me smile. He brushed aside the lush greenery and walked toward me, but by the time he got close, I was already running into his arms. He stopped, shook his head helplessly, but opened his arms wide. When I leapt into his embrace, he held me tightly.